Or do you mean the?
No, the zoning description, everything in these sections, there are multiple well, first of all, let me ask, will you admit that there have been multiple changes from 2023 to 2024 when it comes to what we permit for equines and what you're calling now barnyard animals?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
definitely.
there's been multiple changes. Okay, great.
And I think the
What necessitated, why did we need to make those changes in the no limit on animals, and you can have them on smaller lots, and we specifically removed, and you may say rabbits are not, maybe you didn't intend to remove them, but they're not on the permitted list anymore, and they were before. So that legally, I would assume, tells me they've been removed. So that's my question, why all the changes?
Oh, that's, I don't know if I
Mark,
can
you wanna-
summarize.
I think in a general sense, they took barnyard to be like Leucitis has a farm, barnyard animals that are raised commercially were put in that category, and then everything, equines were different, and then all the other full list of everything from potbelly pigs to small goats to big goats, llamas were not a commercial animal, and people raise sheep, hogs, and cattle, and milk cows commercially. That was kind of like only on the farmland. And then
No, that's not accurate, I'm sorry, but.
Well, that was the intent.
Well, it clearly is not the intent, because we're allowing barnyard animals on R1 now. So we said they were the farm animals we didn't want, but we put them on the smaller lots?
I don't think we have hogs or cattle of any kind.
No, the
Or sheep.
definition of barnyard animals, when I'm saying that, those are the things that are permitted. And they are permitted down to R1. It's on page 64, and then barnyard animals are defined on page 67, 9.7. They're not defined, they're just
I think
discussed.
Jim
I'm
was
looking for
next,
something
yeah.
else at the moment.
Jim, did you have a comment?
I mean, just, I mean, I don't want to interrupt Ed, but I just wanted to kind of get in the same debate in terms of why the changes. I mean, my big takeaway on the changes was we didn't want to count animals, okay? But every community around us counts animals. And I guess what I'm struggling with, and you guys, I mean, you know, I want to build consensus. I want us to all get on the same side. But to go from what we had in 2023 on this particular topic that Ed has raised in terms of barnyard animals to on a small residential lot, I can have 6 llamas. That's craziness. That makes no sense to me. Or I can have whatever. That's illogical to me. When I think of some small lots in a residential area, you're gonna,
I don't know. So,
well, that's an important question.
Okay.
How big is an R1?
10,000 square
I think
feet.
Jim is trying to answer.
Oh,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
0.62 acres to 1.24.
Correct. And if you notice, the last time, when we went through this was laborious. I happened to be a member of the board at that time. It was laborious, only because we were trying to listen to everybody's feedback and try to do the right thing. And I know one of our members, called him doctor because he has a PhD, he tried everything in terms of size, how much excrement do the animals put out. And one of the things, as you can see, because on the page 17 of what you gave us, which I thought was very useful, you show what was in 2023 and what's in the current draft, you could see that we said it had to be at least 1.25 acres. So I remember that debate. I'm sure Ed remembers it too. We wanted to have some type of a limit. But here, we've opened it up to as many as you want, to as small of a lot that you basically have. And that's illogical to me, when the world around us is not that way. And my fear isn't today. It isn't, because no one's complaining, right? So, okay, but what happens tomorrow? When I'm living next to a guy that shows up with 10 goats on that small lot next to me, and I call the village. How do we resolve that issue? Well, if you tell me to go to adjudication, they're going to say, well, the zoning says he can have as many goats as he wants. And I'm just fearful that we're opening up a huge Pandora's box and potentially creating a Hatfields and a McCoys situation from neighbor to neighbor. And I just think it's crazy. I mean, I'm all for openness and for trying to understand it, but based on what I read for the rationale, I'm not there.
So,
I think Jim's going to respond to Jim.
yeah, well, yeah, to both.
James
So
to Jim.
this is a little bit
Yeah.
of the thinking of the commission and what they were trying to do. So they're trying to formulate regulations that would be as open or least restrictive as possible. And they had 4 major considerations. They're up on this slide. So they wanted to ensure the health of the animals, and they felt that other agencies play a role in that. In a lot of instances, current staff or future staff would not have the expertise. It'd be someone like a state or county veterinarian consultant going out and having to do that. Secondly, they wanted to ensure that nuisances were eliminated or mitigated, and they felt that the generally relatively large lot sizes, location standards, and our nuisance codes would cover that. Third, there's concern over mitigating environmental damage. Again, they felt that there were other agencies involved in doing that, and we have the nuisance code to back us up. And I think fourth and finally, there was just a belief that owners are generally responsible, and particularly with the keeping of animals. I gave an example at one of the meetings. Just because people can do something and they can maximize something, you rarely find that in my experience. And the example I gave was in a community I worked in, you could build 2.5-story houses. And yet there were blocks and blocks and blocks of homes that had been built in the late 1940s that were 1-story. And over multiple owners, and even with the demand for space, no one had decided, oh, I can build up, well, let me go build it just because I can do it. I mean, there had to be a big need there, or, obviously it's a great expense. And it would be the same with the keeping of horses. That's a great expense. And if someone did extend and just had too many horses on their property, then they would probably running afoul of some other things, like the smell, the nuisance, the way they house the animals, and there would be other ways that we could combat it. So there was a general idea to remove the limitations on all the animals. So that's how we got to that point.
I think Janet's next, so hang on.
I appreciate the concerns raised by Trustee Muncy and Trustee McKelvey, but I'm not surprised, because this has been, fairly relentless campaign, against the lifting of numerical restrictions on animals. So I'm not surprised that it continues to today. The simple fact of the matter is, if we were to call the question on this issue right now, there is not a consensus to go back to the 2023 mechanism. And so we can talk about how or why or whatever, but I don't think you're going to get 4 votes to go back to the 2023 way. And so I think that's where it's at.
I think we're still presenting
Is
information.
it a consensus to change what the zoning commission has recommended? Because I don't think it is.
I don't think we're done presenting our information that we'd like to present on this issue.
Do you have more then, Ed?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Go.
So what,
I thought it started with some questions, and the questions seem to have been answered. Is there,
I'm not
Were-
allowed to
were there
have
more
more, I'm
questions?
not allowed to have more
Yeah.
I
comments?
just thought you would have laid them all out at once.
Well, it's kind of hard to get the 2 answers first. This is becoming not the kind of exchange that should happen at the board level, so let's stop that. It's not a direct, person against person exchange or attack. What it is I was elected to represent all of the residents of the village in the way that I believe that they want to be represented, and that's exactly what I'm doing. It's not personal for me. So what I believe the residents want is, number one, what we did in 2023 again was heralded, and was the horse owner community liked it because it did not put the onus on them. Let me go back to that, and the nuisance ordinance, because this will come into play on all of the animals, whether it's barnyard, I'll wait till everybody can hear me. It's barnyard, equines, or chickens. If we stand solely on a nuisance ordinance, you are putting the onus, the responsibility on a resident to complain, and that resident then must bring that up in front of the adjudicator and/or a judge to be able to say, this is why I feel that it is a nuisance to me. And that adjudicator or judge is going to have to determine whether or not they agree with that, and they're going to have to look at village code and village ordinances to determine whether or not that's supported. You're putting it all on the resident to do this, and it's neighbor against neighbor versus, why do we have an ordinance about how tall grass can be? I don't know if it's 8 or 9 inches or something, whatever it is. Thank you. So 10 inches. So why do we have that? It's because there's a cutoff where we can finally say, as a resident, look, someone's not maintaining their property at all. My municipality, please step in and take care of this, because that's what we expect from our municipality. And then our municipality can step in and take care of that as a code or ordinance violation, saying, you can't have grass that long. It's the city or village of XYZ saying to this resident, you can't do that. Not this resident versus this resident. So that's the problem I have with, have as many animals as you want, as long as it's not a nuisance, but if it's a nuisance, our nuisance ordinance will take care of it. No, that means neighbor has to step up, identify, and say, I don't want this other neighbor doing this. I'm willing to stand in front of somebody. I'm willing to start this Hatfield-McCoy situation between neighbors in the neighborhood. It's not, our municipality is not living up to its responsibility to protect its residents in this situation. Therefore, again, I think, and I don't know that there's consensus to go back or not to go back. I don't see the detriment of the 2023 ordinance. I thought it was good. I still do. And I haven't heard any arguments why it was bad, other than we want more animals and we think people will be fine. But I think I've made a pretty strong argument why relying on the nuisance ordinance is not good for our residents, and I think our municipality should do better and should uphold their responsibility more.
Oh,
Go ahead, Nick.
So I'll generally comment on this whole ordinance and then kind of drill into this, but one thing I noticed while going through this for as long as I have is that generally, the village has tended to loosen its restrictions and really kind of lengthen the weeds on homeowners and residents. I think that horse owners, animal owners, chicken owners, all of the above, generally speaking, we really need to write our regulations and our policy for the majority, not the anomaly. Animal owners are typically very responsible. They're going to have the correct number of animals that they can take care of. They have the animals for a reason. Again, I really see this as the government overstepping when it's extending its arm into people's yards, telling them what they can and can't do. In the smaller properties, the R1s, R2s, 3s, 4s, that's all going to drill down into the HOAs. In R4 and R3, the R2s, there's no horses, no barnyard animals. We get up into close to 3/4 of an acre before we're even talking about barnyard animals. And the fact is, why do we want to be involved in how many animals people have on their property? Again, why do we want to be involved in regulating this? The animal owners, these are adults. Let adults be adults. Get the number of animals that you feel you can take care of. And I really commend the village for recommending to not have a matrix of numbers on any animals whatsoever outside of where it's not permitted at all. That would be my comment. Thank you.
All right. Well, we could discuss this all night. What if we take a consensus on going back to the 2023, the ordinance, the keeping of animals with numbers, or a consensus on no number of animals to be kept?
Can I rephrase that question? And the
You
question
want?
would be
Well,
this,
yeah.
is the consensus there should be no limit on the number of animals
Okay.
in our zoning,
I'm
or
not-
have some limit? Because that's in essence what this is, there's no limit.
Well,
Right.
But
I-
the numbers are up there, and that's why
I-
I
I
put
would
it that
suggest that-
way. Well, let Tom Williams wanted to speak. Go.
That's the question I'm asking. I mean, so, real quick, to be clear, just maybe because I'm not catching it, on the smallest piece of property that you can have as many animals as you want, what is that number? What's the smallest acreage you can have as many animals as you want? Is it? Yeah.
Easy, that's when you get into these animals, that's 30,000 square feet. Almost three-quarters.
Three-quarters of an acre, okay. Just want to clarify, okay. And so, can I ask a question to Ed, though, real quick, too, just
Sure.
directly?
Go
Okay.
ahead.
Are you saying go back to those numbers, or you're saying you're talking about a limit? I guess is what I'm saying.
I think there should be a limit, yes. I prefer, I think the limit was. I think the limit was good in 2023. Could I be convinced of other numbers? Sure, but I think there should be a number. So, as Jim put it, I think the question really is, do we want a limit on number of animals, or do we not want one, as is being proposed currently?
And we're gonna put up section 9, what is it, 9-1?
Well, I'm looking for,
9-2, what page number is that? Page 64, under the current proposed ordinance. If you'd look at that, that's got the lots on permitted, not permitted.
Is that the 2023 then?
Yes. No, that's the 20, that's the
That's the current,
24
current.
that's
Okay.
being proposed.
May I?
Yeah.
Page 64.
well, there's a chart in the,
What-
one. And Mark, what were you saying to put up?
Page 64 kind of shows.
64 of what document? I have a number of documents.
The proposed one.
This is on keeping of animals, right?
Yes.
We'll let him-
That's
Yeah.
what the proposed ordinance has now, instead of that number that we had up before. Yeah, so the litter enough.
Oops.
And the size of the lot and what they have as their accessory dwelling units does in a way back into a limit. It just doesn't have a straight numerical limit. It's not fair to say there's no limitation, because the size of your lot and your accessory dwelling unit and your setbacks from, and if you've got bees and chickens and then something else, your lot is gonna squeeze down to the point it would restrict how many animals you could have. But it's not a numerical chart. It's based on what you put in your back of the setback of your dwelling unit. It's not no limit, but it's based on how many different types of animals and stuff that you have. You can't use the same space twice. Unless it's bees. They have their spot, they don't need a large footprint other than their hive.
Okay, one last comment, and then we have to move on.
I think the question that we're asking for consensus for is possibly not correct. The question really is, do we have consensus on accepting the recommendation of the zoning commission, which was well-considered, and I'm, again, not surprised but dismayed that we have a minority of trustees trying to undo this work that has gone on for the better part of a year, with the keeping of animals being a key aspect of that work. So I don't believe there's a consensus for not accepting the recommendation of the zoning commission, and that's the question that I would like to pose right now.
Is he gone? Okay.
I'd like to, again, this is probably a point of order, I'd like to caution us as a board in using inflammatory and dramatic language in saying things like dismayed, that some trustees have a difference of opinion. Yes, there was a group that worked on this for over 9 years, and they came up with something. There's a group that's since worked on it for over a year, they came up with something. Because we don't necessarily agree with each other, is not vehement opposition, it's not dismaying, it's us doing our jobs. So we are all trying to do our jobs to the best of what we feel we should do. So let's stop with the language that kind of pits people against each other. It's unnecessary, and it's not something that should happen at the board level.
And Mike wants to be heard if he can be recognized.
Oh.
Go ahead, Mike, I'll put it on and put it up to the mic. Go ahead.
All right, can you guys hear me
A little louder.
Barely.
It's gotta go.
I'm going to put you on there. Now do it.
okay? Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. I think, Mark, you just hit it. There is a number already. We need to clarify that number. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the table, but it should have, if we know what we're talking about by square footage can only be used once, everything you just said, there is a number there. So we could certainly add, again, it doesn't have to be matrix, but we could certainly say based on, in each section, based on this section, the maximum number for this zoning would be blank. Just put that number in there, and I think that would calm a lot of folks down to know that, it's not unlimited. Like I said, there's some physical constraints, but we can get to a number and put a number in there. I think that would.
The issue, I think, though, it doesn't, Mike, as we said, if you had chickens plus this plus that, there'd be a limitation. But it's based on, the current way it's written, it's based on what your lots layout and the setbacks. If you have a pie-shaped lot, you're gonna get a lot less animals of any kind versus a squared away on it. So it's hard for us to put a number in the current zoning ordinance the way it's proposed.
But we're not looking for an enforceable number is what I'm hearing from half the board. I'm hearing there should be an enforceable number from half the board. If
Too
you
much
say-
background noise.
Your background noise is kicking in, Mike.
It's this
I'm
background
moving away from
noise.
the background. I was standing by myself and they came near me. We can assume on a typical, let's say, Fox Mill lot. Let's say, it's this much, it's roughly rectangular. On this type of lot, this is based on these calculations, just so you know, we're talking about, this would be 30 chickens, this would be 90 chickens, this would be 150, it's not 100. So that folks that are unsure or concerned, or like the trustee Munson's point, where the neighbor shouldn't make, if the number backs out that says you can have, based on this 20, and they have 20, they're not going to bother to call. So that shuts down that. And then you make a caveat that it's exclusive to this type of animal. If you choose not to have this type of this other type of animal, the calculations would produce blank. We can do this we have standards in the zoning ordinance that show what a typical lot could look like and show for clarity purposes what setbacks look like, showing the buildable area of the lot. We can do this for the same thing, and it's just, I think, like I said, to hopefully calm down some folks that are scared or nervous. That's it.
Thank you, Mike. So are you in favor of modifying the zoning proposed ordinance? Or?
I don't think the concept, I'm fine with the concept. I don't need to modify the concept. I think we want to put that as a point of clarification. Like I said, we have a bunch of other things that there are clarifying that, that describe. When we say this setback, here's an example of how we're going to calculate it. Okay? So here's how we're going to calculate the number of chickens. So when we go to have this thing published, we have a number in there that says, based on these factors, it would be so many animals.
Is it for Mike Millet, or, okay.
Go.
Are you thinking of this as an illustration? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and then Jim? No, I'm fine. You're good? Tom, go.
Can I ask a question to Mike? Mike, are you going to be here next week?
Yes.
Okay. can I make a motion to push this into next week? I don't know what he's saying. I don't completely understand what he's saying. And I'm sorry, I'd like to hear it clearer. I think you kind of feel the same. Do you agree with me or a little bit? I just want to hear what he's saying. He was the one that worked on this, and I want to be clear that this is set before we move on. Is that a way of moving past this question and jumping on to come up with some of the other ones? Maybe we have more consensus.
Get more others.
Consensus on, but I'd like to hear what he's saying, because
That's a good
I
idea.
can't really hear what he's saying.
I'm good with that.
That's a good idea, Tom.
I'm good with that.
All right, consensus for that? To move on? Put it to the next meeting?
Yeah, and Carmen, maybe you can specify after they discuss it further, even if we list this as action next meeting, they could discuss and edit it at that meeting if they want to put in numbers, right?
Right.
So
Might be best to have a proposal.
we'll have it, you've got the current code that's being proposed, the zoning, that doesn't have numerical limits. And it's, we can work on an illustrative example, but it's not going to be as exact as a chart that was number 17 that you had in the 2023. That's been removed, and you have to back into a number of each animal based on what somebody has as a lot size and how many different animals they have on that lot. So I don't know if that'll ever answer what Trustee Muncie's saying, is he'd like to go back to an absolute chart of this many animals of this size per the lot sizes that are listed in the former chart. So you'll just be deferring this and then coming to a consensus on what to do with that item next Tuesday night.
Go ahead.
I think, when I look at this list, I think, first of all, it was passed to us unanimously, right? From the zoning board. I think this is probably, what I'm seeing here is different opinions. I think Mike not being here is kind of, we had a meeting short people last week. We have a meeting short a person this week. And I just want to nip this in the bud and get a consensus. I'd love to see unity completely on this subject. So that's kind of why I'm making the motion to move it into next week and
I
kind
think
of get
it's a
onto
good
some
idea.
things. We had a couple things off the list that we went, okay, boom, 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 that's good.
But just
But it's tough
as
to-
a point,
Yeah.
the zoning ordinance that you're reviewing is a full document, and you're talking about modifying a piece or a page or section of before you pass a vote on the entire document. So it's going to take 4 trustees to modify what the ordinance before you is. So keep that in mind to talk and be amongst yourselves between now and Tuesday night.
Okay, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment on that. And I agree with what you said, but generally speaking, probably the U.S. Congress is not a good example to use, but I'll use it anyways. Because generally, when you have what I would call a large piece of legislation that comes before whatever body, the Senate, the House, in this case, a small village board, you do want to build consensus, and you do want to try to have such a large piece be unanimous. And the last time the board had this come from a committee and had to go, we went back and forth to try to find that common ground, okay? And that should be our goal. So, and again, I'm not personally objecting to what Trustee Burson said, but to say that, 2024 has to be accepted in its entirety, I disagree with. I think we have to try to find that common ground to get this thing across the finish line. Because I think we all want that. I want that.
Absolutely.
I want this thing passed.
Absolutely.
But to write off others' comments as somehow we've got some, I don't know, past history that, we were falling on a sword for 2023 is not accurate.
Well, and I think what Tom is saying is he wants that unanimity, and he wants Mike to be here in person. So there's no
Absolutely.
disagreement. So we'll just take this section and hold it in abeyance until next Tuesday night, when hopefully all 7 are here in person, to try to get to a consensus. Because it doesn't look like we can get to one tonight
Is this
on this
applying
topic.
to barnyard animals equines, or equines, and chickens? Because
Yeah, I
Trustee
think-
Millet was talking about
Chickens
chickens
to
too.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's all
or
three.
I suspect, I guess you could have a, do you want to restrict roosters or let roosters stay as a chicken, Mike?
I still am not 100% sure on that one. I mean, I know nobody would have all roosters. That's absurd. But I mean, there is the possibility. So maybe it's a percentage of maximum of 1 rooster per 5 hens, or 1 rooster per 10 hens, something along those lines.
We'll push that to the next meeting, too. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
Go ahead. Yep. So we'll talk all 3 items on animals till next Tuesday night.
Sounds good.
And then the next item
Would be 6.
would be the table of permitted and special uses. I think that there was some question, and I'd like to recognize Jim Brown, because as we were looking at this, as we got some feedback from some of the trustees, we did feel like we had an oversight on, and Jim, if you can pull that up.
Page number would be helpful.
Yep.
Speak on this.
I know that there's been a desire of this board and the zoning commission to try to restrict bringing of and creating commercial yards or landscape yards on farm properties. Because that's, and we thought we kind of put some restrictions on that in the use table, but Jim and I, when we were looking at some other things, I said, are we absolutely sure that we are precluding someone buying, whether it's 10 acres or 50 or 100 acres, and then putting essentially what's an industrial park and neighbors to the east of the river of Fox out here where they think they can get away with creating a commercial yard. And I thought we did in the zoning deliberations, but Jim and I found one area that we would recommend tightening that aspect. So Jim, if you would show us that.
I'm trying to find it now. It's contractor yard.
Contractor yard, yes.
I can't find it. Yeah, so here it is.
And this is what page
It's
now?
under transportation, logistics,
In construction.
on page 38,
Page-
towards the bottom.
38 at
Yeah.
the bottom.
So this is this is perhaps a little easier. It's the original Excel spreadsheet that did not convert too well to PDF. That's why I'm bringing this up. The resolution wasn't that high. So this was the 2 issues in question were contractor office. So if someone has a bona fide construction business and they're running administration out of there, they have a building and maybe a garage is one thing, and then the other is just people looking to park a bunch of landscaping trailers. Their business is someplace else, and they don't have room to accommodate all of their equipment, and they just want an open field. So that's why this was broken up into 2 different categories. And here we see down at the end in contractor yard, if I scroll up here, these columns are RD and farm business, that's that overlay. Right now, on the zoning map, we have I think only 1 entity, that's the Wasco Nurseries, that's farm business. So we'd have to add that overlay to an existing farm zone property. But it would be a permitted use then. I'm not really sure, in that column M, which is FB, I'm not really sure that either of those should be a permitted use or even allowed at all. Our contractor man is shaking his head over there, so.
And I looked at that and I said, I think we made a mistake.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was in that business, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, my dad was a contractor, I sold to contractors. The one thing they are all looking for, every one of them, is to get rid of, they're looking for open yards. I used to rent yards. I had 150 open yards in a municipal thing in Carroll Stream that was permitted the correct way. So I had 150 people in about 10 minutes that wanted to rent from me. And they will come. If you open it up and keep it wide open, and you're going to see skid steers and backhoes, and it's gonna, I mean, they're all wishing they could work out of their house because it's hard to find. Go to DuPage County, go to DeKalb County and say, I want to, you know, if I said, hey, I wanted to put a contractor's yard in, unless you're Home Depot or Menards, you can be as ugly as you want, by the way, because those guys generate sales tax. Contractors do not generate sales tax. No one wants them.
Right.
And I'm telling you, if you open it up, it's going to be like word of mouth, and they'll be here, and it'll be over. And it'll look just, I mean, and people say they won't come. Oh, they will come. Because I've got a lot of contractors in my neighborhood, actually, and that's their office. You would never know. And, you know, I just walked up to them and I said, hey, we're looking at this. They said, you're not going to open this neighborhood up, I mean, this community up for yards, are you? And they were asking me because they wanted to know, because they wanted to move here.
Well, that's what, when I went back and looked at this, I think we're leaving a crack of the door to do
Okay.
that. So I wanted to highlight that and recommend that you do make a modification to either make it a special use and you put all kinds of restrictions on it, or you just do a blanket,
Not
change the
permitted.
P to a line and it's not permitted.
Okay, what's the